Welcome back, my friends, to the sweet spot where IT leaders share the insight with other leaders and others that want to lead. My name is Carlos Vargas, and as in every week, I have my two co-hosts, Howard Holton and Paul Lewis. Hello, guys.
Hey there.
Hey, Carlos.
Very well. Oh, are you still snow on the mountain? Or you came back to the mountain?
There's no snow. It is incredibly hot. We are running between 31 Celsius to 34 Celsius on a daily basis. It feels like 40s. It's hot. It's not something you want to go out with. The dogs have where they used to do like a good 2-kilometer walk is doing like 100-meter walks. They're coming back, doing their business back in the house.
So for those of us that lived in parts of the world that matter, what does that work out to? Is that like a 95?
I was going to say that.
Well, imagine a 45-minute walk now are, 5 to 10-minute walks.
So it's like 100 degrees Fahrenheit?
Yeah, it's hot.
That's too hot. For as north as you live, that's too hot.
Yeah.
That's
It's muggy. It's the mugginess that has the negative impact on you.
Right. Do keep in mind, the Republican Party has declared there is no such thing as climate change.
Right.
Which means all of you all, to get there, everyone in Toronto has obviously left their furnaces on, and that's a big mistake. You should send out a bulletin or something.
Right. Fortunately, we have different politics the more north you go, right? So there's a general belief in this country across north, east to west where that exists.
Oh, I see. So it's just that it's not that climate change doesn't exist. It's a uniquely not U.S. problem.
That's correct. It just doesn't exist in the U.S. It exists everywhere else. Just doesn't exist in the U.S.
Well, that's good to know. That's good to know. I'll remember that as I travel, I'll have to pack differently.
Right.
Sorry,
but I am packed up, ready to go to Disneyland tomorrow for a 5-day fun experience with the youngest just before he goes to high school. The oldest just dropping her off at college. It's a life-changing pod.
It's a pod about changes. Yeah, we have started to kind of go through the house and start to pack for a pending sale and relocation to Atlanta.
Nice.
At which time, all of us will be in the same time zone. Well, all of us will live in the same time zone.
My headspace, completely different situation.
It will be nice to be able to not have to do the crazy kind of gymnastics I feel we sometimes do on a week-to-week basis.
Right. The time zone calculations.
And assuming we keep the pods in order of recording, the next pod that our audience sees after this one will actually have all of us together in the same room.
Nice.
We tried to coordinate Carlos, but I don't know, he had some excuse.
That's right. Some work excuse.
It was terrible.
I'm not sure I bought into it.
We'll see if there could be something. I may drop on a parachute or something.
That would be hilarious.
It couldn't even be a long drive. What's that drive? 10 hours? It's nothing.
It actually will be easier to just get a jumper plane. Literally, let's talk about it. Let's see. I can get my parachute plane, and I could just jump. So thinking about that, I know that we take time through different mediums to build the ideas where we want to go, when we're going to share here. Sometimes we exchange things that we are living in our different roles to try to help to build a strategy. But sometimes our thinking is not just focused on the technology, because even though we're technical leaders, we had to think strategically. What happened when somebody think that then we have lost our technical ability and think that we're dumb because we have moved just to think about the strategy?
Yeah, so this kind of happened to me a few days ago. I took a new call. We were talking through a topic I honestly didn't care about. I will be clear. I don't really care about telephones anymore. That doesn't mean as an organization we don't care about telephones. It doesn't mean that telephones aren't part of my strategy, but they are no longer part of my day-to-day kind of thought process and concern. If I'm being honest, we figured out how telephones work, I don't know, 60 years ago. And they've evolved, but haven't really been top of mind, front of mind for a very long time.
Right.
I took a call for two reasons. One, I like the vendor that I was talking to, and two, it was a friend, and he said, "Hey, is this something that you'd be interested in? We have a really good practice around this." And I wanted to know, does this sound intriguing enough that I sent it to the person in my organization that does care about it, that does have day-to-day care and feeding, right? And so I said, it's fine, but let's keep the conversation strategic so I understand, how does this fit into an overall strategy? What are the benefits I can bring to the business? And how do I evolve beyond just the phone rings and you pick it up and answer it?
Mm-hmm.
So we're on the call, and I said, okay, guys, just to do some level setting, I no longer, like, phones aren't something I care about anymore. I no longer really spend any time on them. I went through exactly what I told you guys, and I said, so let's keep it strategic so I understand the business benefits. The guy started talking, and then he went, well, let me back up and make sure that this is the strategic conversation that you're looking for. And he immediately changed his tone to like he was speaking to a kindergarten classroom, explaining what daddy did for a living.
Mm.
And I went, yeah. So
He
this
apparently doesn't know you. Is that what?
Yeah. So I'm like, I don't understand why someone would think strategic means dumb. And it occurred to me, the reason they think that is because they don't actually know how to have a strategic conversation.
Right.
So they've just assumed someone who's involved in strategy isn't involved in anything useful. And thus a strategic conversation means not a practitioner anymore. And therefore we'll dumb it down until the lights either dim or go out. Right. And in this case, he stepped in it a little bit and said, hey, we're using artificial intelligence and machine learning like everybody else does. And I said, okay, cool. Let's stop there and dig in a little deeper. And they're not really using AI and ML in any useful way.
Right.
Like, I get it. You use AI and ML when you add a plugin, right? So if you're using transcription services, that's technically machine learning at this point, because we're using machine learning algorithms to understand language. I get if you're using intent management or intent detection, that we're technically using ML. But if all you've done is add a plugin to your tool, you're not actually using it. You're using a plugin that happens to involve AI and ML.
Somebody built those algorithms and you're just applying them to your business.
Correct. And I don't know that I would ever say that, that should allow a tool maker to say that's part of our tool. It's not really part of your tool. It's part of Microsoft's tool set. And you're leveraging Microsoft's tool set.
Right.
Have you encountered that, Paul?
Many times, as I'm sure this was not the first time you've encountered that conversation. I think there's always, especially from a vendor, but I also hear it from internal teams where you're trying to have a different conversation and they're perceiving it as a depth conversation, right? So yes, it is absolutely true, and it probably will always be absolutely true that the people who work for you, or the people that are closer to the keyboard, know significantly more depth with the topic than you do. Absolutely true. I fully appreciate that reality. That's been true for a couple of decades of me being a leader. You will know more than I do. Great. But I'm not trying to get you to have a conversation that is dumbing down the topic for me. I want you to have a different conversation with me. It's less about you taking it from code to concept. I want you to take it from concept to implementation or value, or tell me the why, not the what's. Give me enlighten me on a usage that I wouldn't prepare to know about. Like, educate me on something, take me out of my box, right? Take me out of my comfort zone. Give me a reason to care beyond what I might have a preconceived value on. Like that's the different conversation. And I have it just as much internally as I do externally. It's painful when it is external because that shuts down the conversation real quick.
It's actually interesting. You brought something up there. So as we go through the why, right, and I get intrigued, and I got intrigued by their use of the words AI and ML.
Mhm.
When I dug into what I'd really want to get out of that, right, how I would want that to work, what an application of that would look like for me, it doesn't have it. It doesn't do it. After hanging up the phone, I realized the fact that it doesn't do it means there's an opportunity. And guess what? I found out nobody else does it either.
Hmm.
So I think an interesting pod topic might be how do we manage that innovation and invention that we create within ourselves, right? What does that look like to us? How do we handle that? Right. What do we do with those things when we see an obvious miss within the market? Right. So I think maybe our viewers can look forward to that in a future topic. What do you think, Carlos?
Yeah, I will make it a list. It's interesting that you mentioned that. I've been going through a similar challenge of what you described, but in my case, I'm the one going up as a leader, always in charge of the highly technical, getting the teams. And I have technically done the up level to bring the strategic conversation. Now I have to get a team to understand that difference so we can then add the value to the business from that strategic without what you mentioned, that dumbing it down. And it's interesting that we're having this conversation because I was having a session last week. And the feedback was really good because they have never received something like that, specifically talking to sales and helping them look at the strategic value that they bring when they present the company's products. So it's interesting that you mentioned that because then it's difficult. So I think my question for you guys is, how do you train or coach your teams so they understand the difference between both, so they can then have that strategic conversation and learn to recognize, like how are you, and Paul, you guys recognize it when they were talking to you and say, okay, this is not strategic, this is actually dumbing it down and it making me waste my time. So this vendor doesn't understand probably what I truly need.
So let me go first, because I would say the answer to your question is poorly. That poorly, because you worked for me as an enterprise architect, where the goal was to make that change, and having that revelation last week means I failed at my job.
No.
As the lead of enterprise architecture, at least to some degree. The challenge is it isn't one thing, right? Learning to speak strategically isn't one thing, and it's not something that I ever got from a book. It's not something I got from a classroom. It's not something that I got from a single source or single mentor or single conversation or single effort or single thing. It was an evolution of thought that occurred over a decade, maybe, right? Where it went from kind of that, I'm a technologist in a technology space, working with technology to bring value to an organization, right? That's kind of the beginning of that journey. It's the realization that I'm not doing it for the sake of technology. I'm doing it for the value that it brings to the business. And I think you kind of have to come along to that a little bit on your own. You could be pushed and prodded, but I can actually remember kind of that wake up point for me. And then I think it's okay, cool. So now that I've come to that realization, how do I apply that lens? Right. I always think of it as kind of this series of lenses that go over your perspective, right? Okay, so now if my lens is no longer make the technology work, but really improve the business through the efficiencies and capabilities that technology enables, then you kind of start to like, at first you're putting that lens on. Okay, I'm in a conversation with the business and therefore I'm wearing that lens, so that when I talk to them, I talk in their language, I talk to their goals, I talk to how they get paid, right? What motivates them. And then you find yourself doing the same thing in a meeting that doesn't have the business in it at all, right? You're with other technologists. And now you're speaking a language they don't actually speak, right? And so you turn it off. You go, oh shit, I'm wearing the wrong lens, and you take the lens off. Now you're back to technology speak. But then the next time you're in the room, you do the same thing. And you find before long, I'm now wearing that lens all the time. That has now become the lens through which I see. And now I'm adding the technology for technologist lens, as opposed to before where I was taking it off, right? And then I'm still at the same stack level, right? I'm still thinking product first. What's the value of the product? What's the capability that adds to the product? And then I start kind of moving into process. All right, cool. So now we've been stuck in this kind of product view. Now I'm going to look at a process view, because a process view moves me up the stack and really separates me from the capabilities tied just to the product, right? And then pretty soon that becomes a lens. And now you're no longer thinking about products. You're no longer thinking about tools first. You're thinking about what is the process, and then how do I find a tool that enables that process, rather than how do I build a process around the capabilities of a tool I own. Then you keep running into the same problem, which is people, because I'm not speaking the language that people speak. No one likes process natively, right? Human beings are not built for process. We're little individual chaos animals that got together with sticks and stones in tribes and hit shit over the head, right? It wasn't until we invented farming, agriculture at scale that we invented anything remotely close to a process, right? So it doesn't actually come naturally to us. And then you start thinking about people. Okay, cool. So how do I start changing hearts and minds? At that point, now you're a strategist, because strategy is all about starting with hearts and minds.
Right.
The hearts and minds are just the lens of the business we wish to operate in. It may not even be the business that we currently do operate in, right? Because the business should be striving for, how do I become the thing I want to become? How do I become the thing, my vision statement? How do I become the thing my president says we're going to be, that we presented to the board, that we presented to the world, that we've talked about on the street, right? And a real strategist isn't aiming for, how do I accomplish today what I need to do today, but how do I move this machine, this organism, into position to be what we've said we want to be.
Mhm.
Right. And everything that I described really was just changing the conversation for today. And then process is changing the conversation for near term tomorrow. People is changing the conversation for, say, a year. When you finally realize you're a strategist is when you've changed the conversation to 3 years and 5 years and 10 years, right? And you as a strategist can close your eyes and see the whole decade kind of laid out.
So it's more visionary?
Sure, but a visionary is a strategist.
Okay.
I don't think those two terms are separated, and they're really just separated within the context of how we talk about them, because we're not used to actually having strategists. And the reality is, not to be too blunt, but we've been hosed by MBAs who call themselves strategists that don't actually understand strategy. A financial analysis of the next 3 years is not a strategy.
Right.
Strategy must have a story attached to it. You cannot tell the story through numbers alone. Numbers support the story. They are the evidence, right? They are not the story itself. And so if all you can do is look to the numbers and expect that to tell the story, you are not a strategist, you are a financial planner. And we have too many financial planners that sit in the C-suite. They will not help you accomplish the goal alone. You must have the storytelling piece of strategy, which involves people, which involves process.
You certainly need both, right? You can't, you need a set of people that thinks incremental, right? Where I am now and where I need to be in the next step, because that's where the devil's in the details, right? The individual coder, the individual sysadmin has to do individual work. The problem, of course, is that nobody's thinking about the flagpole or the waypoints, right? So somebody's got to think about the longer term complexity, which direction I have to turn, how long it takes to make that turn. If I have to displace a waypoint with another waypoint because of some external economic constraint, then I can do so, right? The incrementalist isn't thinking that way. And to answer your question, Carlos, where I spend my time is ensuring that whomever's presenting to me, whether it's internal or external, is out of their comfort zone, right? I don't want to know the details of the thing that you're selling me. I don't want to know the architectural details of the thing you're trying to build. Tell me more about why you're doing it. Tell me more about what the audience who's going to consume this thing is going to care about it. tell me about what waypoints that I have already determined going to be, how this attributes to getting that goal, or why the people that are waiting at the flagpole care about the thing that you're talking about. Is it going to create a bright light to make sure I can get there? So getting those people out of their comfort zone of the features and functions and style and programming into the directional attitude of what I need to make this whole strategy become true becomes important. And that is a difficult thing to do. And it's really about asking different questions. It's about stopping the conversation quickly and saying, I don't want to hear about this anymore. It's not as interesting to me as what you might think it is. I want to talk about this set of topics. I want to talk about how it aligns to what I care about in my business, or what my customers care about, or what my shareholders, investors care about. This is what's more appealing to me. And if you're uncomfortable with that conversation, then you need to go spend time thinking about those answers and then come back to me a second time.
Yeah, I think part of it is we're all in sales.
Yeah.
And I don't carry a bag. I'll never carry a bag. That's not something I'm interested in. And I have respect for people who do that. Like, please don't take it that way. It's just not something that it's not something I natively understand, but I absolutely understand that I'm in sales, and I've been in sales for 30 years. Right. So that, I think that's a big piece of it, right? Is how do I get the people who work for me to understand that they are also in sales? And sales is not about talking about what you want to talk about. It's why we have sales engineers. If sales was about talking about what you wanted to talk about, there would just be sales. There would be no sales engineers, and the people that are sales engineers would be the salesmen.
Right.
Right. It's about talking about what your client wants to talk about, what your customer wants to talk about, what your audience wants to talk about. Right. Yeah. And so that's kind of a big challenge, especially for technologists, for practitioners, right? They want to talk about the shiny thing that they're doing without taking into consideration that their audience may not care or understand what the shiny thing is, what the benefit it has, or why you would do it. Mm-hmm. You need to start with the sales aspect. What is this shiny thing going to do to improve my life, to improve my business, to improve my day-to-day job, right? And it can be near field, right? How's it going to help me tomorrow? Or it can be long-term. How is this going to make a big impact in the long term, right? Strategic investment, as it were. And I think once we can convince people that part of their job is sales, then we can do the next step, which is, okay, now that we understand part of my job is sales, right? That I'm constantly selling. How do I ensure that I'm selling the right thing to the right audience in the right way? Mm-hmm. Sort of break it down into a process.
So what would have been the perfect conversation with that telephone organization, with that vendor? Well, what would you have expected the conversation to go? How would you have?
Well, they were talking about contact center, right? So
contact center. Yeah, I said telephone, but I meant contact center.
Yeah, and so it really would have been, hey, I understand this isn't, like you're the CIO, so you're probably not intimately involved in the contact center. When was the last time you were intimately involved in the contact center? And I would have given a very specific dated answer. Mm-hmm. Okay, cool. So a lot's changed in that time. Let me tell you what contact center can mean today to an organization we're just going to talk greenfield, right? Kind of big picture. This is the strategic value, because everyone realized we spent a decade not changing contact center, mm-hmm. right? We spent a decade not really doing anything different. We just took what was a series of kind of closed systems and made them a little bit more open source, made them a little bit more digital. But once we did that, there wasn't really a whole lot of innovation for a period of time. Well, now that innovation has come to contact center. And this is what that innovation looks like. And this is what that innovation can mean to your organization. That conversation, yeah, I'm super into that conversation, right? And that conversation gets me to kind of open the doors and go, okay, cool. Well, these are the people that you need to talk to within my organization. And I really want to talk about that innovation, because the innovation is the buying trigger. Right? And that's something I can bring to my organization and say, hey, that thing that we do that frankly we're bad at, this is how we're going to get better at it. And this is an iterative step to do so. Right? It's like, Paul, you and I talk about, and we talk about on the show a lot. We talk about capabilities a lot, mm-hmm. that term, and kind of what it means, right? Capabilities are something new and innovative that are brought to the organization, right? What are the capabilities? What can I deliver to the business that has value? That's a capability. And if we don't frame the conversation that way, then I'm not really interested in the conversation, whether it's internal or external.
Yep. Would you have wanted them to ask about your future? In other words, is it an effective conversation for them to give you the debrief of the last 10 years to align that to what you think the future of your technology team or business needs to sort of overcome over the next 5 years?
Absolutely, but in those like first intro calls, before I even know that I'm interested in the technology, I really want you to get me excited about the capability you can add.
Got it.
Then I'll lift the skirt and I'll go, okay, cool. Well, just so you know, this is what we have planned for the next 10 years. This is what I'm involved in. This is what my strategy looks like, right? Then I'm thrilled to have that conversation every time, because now you've got me excited because I see some alignment.
Right.
And to see that alignment, I don't really want to waste the half hour going through my story.
That's fair. You're looking to see, based on your knowledge of your future, whether this thing might be a rock, right? A big rock, a small rock, but is it a rock in that strategy?
Correct.
Or is it even a full waypoint, right? Because I'm going to learn something from you in the next 30 minutes that might even change how I'm even perceiving my strategy going forward.
Yeah, and that's really what I'm looking for, right? I'm looking for those lighthouse moments,
right?
Where I'm sailing through the darkness, not expecting land, and then bing, there's a lighthouse, right? Oh crap, there's land ahead. I've now learned something new.
Right.
And that land ahead means I must change my strategy, or else I'm going to hit the shore. So how do I change that strategy to make it a more efficient strategy? Now I can update my map, and the next ship that comes through knows there's land here. We're gonna have to sail around it because it's not our final destination.
Yeah. It's actually one of the reasons why I start the vast majority of my presentations with that one slide that you've seen many times. Smarter people work somewhere else, right? Because I want to level set the thing here, right? To say, while you probably know your business and your technology very well, you don't know everything. And it's the outside world that actually is going to have a much bigger dramatic effect on your strategy than what you already know today. Capabilities, right? What capabilities are you missing in order to actually move the needle in your organization in some dramatic way versus just small incremental change based on the things you already know?
It was funny. This is all kind of leading towards another issue that I see, and I see it a lot more internally than externally, but I see it externally as well, right, from vendors. And that is the smart bully in the room, right? Where you have someone very, very smart in the room, and their contribution often hits you through bullying, right? Like it happened yesterday. We're on the call, we're going through kind of projects and issues. And one of the issues is we had someone leave, and their account is the service account for a particular service. And I said, why is this not a service account? To which I reply, service accounts are stupid. And nobody uses service accounts. And the reason nobody uses service accounts is because the alerts need to be watched. And a service account doesn't guarantee the alerts are being watched. To which I responded, that is a ridiculous answer. Everyone uses service accounts. I don't know how you pass an audit without a service account. You may fail the audit if no one's monitoring the alerts from the service account.
Right.
But we use service accounts for a very specific reason. And it is so that when someone leaves the organization, we don't break the account by disabling it, nor do we have to change who it goes to.
Right.
By coding, we simply go into the service account, and if all we've done is CC someone, we just change the CC.
Right.
And we are never doing this again. This is not the way that it is to be done, right? And I come to find out later, this is a conversation that had been had a bunch, and he had just bullied his way through. This comes back to that assumption: strategic does not mean dumb. While I'm not sitting at the keyboard anymore, I'm still highly technical. I'll let you guys challenge. You guys are welcome to call me if you think that is incorrect. And so if you're going to make a claim that I determine as stupid in the room, even if it's not strategic where I want to have the conversation, I'm still going to call you out on it. Right? And strategic doesn't mean we won't dig into things. that we won't go from 10,000 feet down to the ground level. It just means I want the option to do it, not the other way around.
Right. There's strategic ideas, there's strategic concepts, there's also strategic decisions, kind of what you're saying now, right? Is that there might be a whole bunch of technical data or technical process to which you're currently undergoing, but you're doing it for the wrong reasons, or you're doing it because you have a misunderstanding of what other people are actually doing or behaving. And that's where the strategic decision-making comes in place to say, it's not that I necessarily know more than you, but I have much more appreciation of the external implications of the tactical process to which you're undertaking. And maybe we should change.
Right. The strategic direction of what you're doing is wrong. The tactics apply, right? But the way you're applying those tactics don't apply because strategically everybody does it differently.
Right. Right.
The industry doesn't do that.
Yeah, and you're impacting waypoints that way, right? The last thing you want to do is put up your own constraints to hit those waypoints, right? Instead of creating, a bow that looks like this, you have a bow that looks like this. It's not helpful, right? Unless of course you're hauling garbage, right?
And or you're no longer creating rowboats, you're creating very small sailboats.
Right.
Right. Well, if we're sinking and there's no wind, we need rowboats. And the reason we use rowboats is because we're generally also using them when we're very close to shore. When I don't actually want a sail pushing me into the rocks, I want more fine-tuned control over where I'm going. Use rowboats. But I get that sailboats are easier because we let the wind do the work. We actually need rowboats for a very specific purpose. That's not an innovation that's going to work.
Right. You also need wind. That's not a constant, consistent factor.
No, and I certainly can't guarantee wind when I'm buoyed inside what might be inside a mountain range.
Right.
There may be external factors cutting the wind, right? And so to kind of stick with that, right? Were you to replace your rowboats with sailboats, you would not fundamentally understand the purpose of the sailboats and the why the purpose of the rowboats, and you would not understand the why behind why the rowboats exist in the first place.
Right.
I see a lot of that. No. While I understand that you think this is an innovation, the fact is the prior method existed for a very specific reason that you can no longer accomplish underneath your new method. So while it sounds neat, you've completely missed the point of why that existed in the first place.
Right.
Guys,
Good chat, Carlos.
an interesting chat. Strategic does not mean that I'm dumb.
Mm-hmm.
It means that a strategic conversation needs to be focused on the business and what is the value that that solution can bring. So learning to go up is a process. And Howard, by the way, I learned a lot working for both of you. The interesting thing is the application to help others see it. That is what is the challenge of you understand it, you do it, how now you bring other people to do the same thing. It's the growth process. And I think that that's what we help a lot through this podcast to the leaders. My friends, as I learn every week, you learn, make sure that you share this with your team, your family, your friends, put it on social media, put it everywhere. Make sure that you hit that bell, you subscribe, and we'll see you on our next episode.